welcome back to the potting shed. Today I want to talk to you about these guys, the Syngonium, Podophyllum, Albo, Variegata. That's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Basically, the variegated Syngonium, a beautiful plant. Here you go, have an eyeful. A really pretty plant that I'm relatively new to actually, and I've been learning all about these recently. And more specifically in this video I want to talk to you about reverting, how the variegated leaves can revert back to more green leaves. And so if you found this video, that's generally what I want to talk to you about today. As I say, I'm no expert on these plants. In fact, I've not really kept variegated plants before, but I've been learning all about them, and so I thought I would share my experiences and we can go on this journey together. So if you've got a Syngonium and it's getting more and more green leaves and you're worried about it, reverting, which is basically going from a variegated plant to a completely green plant, then this video is for you, because I'm going to explain why this happens and how to stop it happening. So let's get cracking with that straight away, because there are a few misunderstandings, I suppose, that some people don't really understand how it works and what you need to do to keep it the way you want it. Obviously, you've bought a plant like this, they're not particularly cheap. They are getting cheaper, these particular type of Syngoniums. I think they're a little bit easier to find than they used to be, but they're still relatively expensive. On the sort of general level of houseplants, they're up there in the prices, but compared to sort of like rare and collectible prices, very cheap, because those just go crazy. I'm certainly not going anywhere near those, not for the time being anyway. But these guys, I found them in a relatively local garden centre, not the ones down the road, but one where I happened to be, and I thought, you know what, they are pretty and I'd like to give them a go. And I'd like to do a few projects with these in the future as well, so stay tuned for that. But more specifically, the reversion. So what's happening to a Syngonium when they are variegated? It's a non-natural state to have a variegated plant of any type. So it is actually bred by the breeders who grow these and breed these plants. They will come across a variegation, and then they will then selectively breed those to get more and more of them. And so it is a non-natural state. So when you see these with half white leaves and even full white leaves, they look very pretty, but it is an unnatural state. It's a lack of pigmentation. So when you have a leaf without green chlorophyll in there, it will struggle to actually photosynthesize, because it needs the green to be able to create energy from the light that it gets and grow. So although it is pretty, it is a non-natural scenario for them to be in. If they happened in nature, you would just have one plant with it, and it may or may not slowly grow more and more green leaves as it gets older, and then that would be it, and you wouldn't see it anymore. It is obviously a nice abnormality, a pretty abnormality, and it is something that the growers will try to get more of. But having said that, firstly, you don't want too many of them, because too much of a good thing is not a good thing in this case, because, as I said, they need the green leaves to grow. So if you've got a lot of completely white leaves and a lot of even the half leaves, the less green you have, the less well the plant is going to do. So just bear that in mind. If you've got this plant and you want it completely variegated, firstly, it's unlikely to happen. You will not get it a plant that's completely variegated. You may get one that is more than another, but it's unlikely to be completely, because it won't hang around long, because it's going to struggle to make energy for itself and it's going to die. But what you can do is have a nice balance. And when I say a nice balance, is lots of nice, maybe half and half ones, and some nice marbling through the leaves. And you can have all sorts of combinations, as long as there's a bit of green on there for the leaf to be able to photosynthesize and to be able to support its own energy. Now, obviously, as you go along, you can get more and more green leaves. This is what's known as reverting. I don't know if you can see that one. There is more or less almost completely green. There is some variegation on there, but that one's almost completely green. This one here, again, is a big mature leaf and nearly completely green. There's a bit more variegation on that one. So this is what tends to happen. The more leaves that grow, they tend to be the greener ones. But here's the good news. You can selectively prune for the variegation. So it seems like you can do something about it. But one common misconception is that extra sunlight creates more of the variegation, more white. That isn't the case. It seems like you can get a stronger white. So I don't know, there's not that many examples here, but you can get various different shades of white, from a washed out creamy color all the way up to the bright whites that you get this leaf. There's a few on here that's quite white. This one behind it, I don't know if you can see that one, probably not. There's a few particularly white ones, and from what I understand, the more light that the plant is going to get, the more vivid the white is going to be. It's not going to get you any more white. Okay, so if you've got it in a particularly shady area, they'll grow okay in a lower light area, and you certainly don't want them in too much full sun. But in the brighter the location, the more white these variegations are going to be. Now, secondly, depending on what plant you have, there is only so much variegation in a individual stem, and you can see that by looking at the stems. And you'll see, I'll give you some B-roll so you can get a close-up. You'll be able to see from the stems the variegation running up through the stems in the form of stripes running up through there, and that is the variegation. And so if you've got a stem that is nearly all green with virtually no variegation, then the leaves going to come off of those stems aren't going to be particularly variegated. It doesn't matter what you do, it's just not going to be that much. Or if you get a particularly bright, vivid, stripy stem, then you're probably going to get a lot more. In other words, whatever, I guess, genetically in the cell level is in the plant, is in the plant. And so some you might get more, some you might get less. But what can happen as they grow, as you can see here, you're going to get more and more green leaves. So if I was to leave this and do nothing, the chances are the more of the more mature leaves that come will be more and more green. Not always, but from what I gather, that's generally going to be the case until the point where you've only got green leaves. And once they're all green, you can't magic any more variegation out of them. So if you've got a Syngonium and they've all gone green, it's probably not going to get any more variegation, I'm afraid. So you do need to do something before that happens. But like this one, if the latest one is green, what you can do is cut the latest one down, and like this one, prune off the green leaves, and that will hopefully stimulate more leaves coming from the stem. And if the stem has variegation, you've got a better chance that the next one is going to be variegated. So you can control this. And like I said, just be a little bit careful that you don't wipe out all of the green leaves, because the plant will suffer. But you can certainly help keep on top of it by regular pruning of the big 100% green leaves. And that means that you're going to have a regular stock of variegated leaves. So that is the strategy, if you like, of how to keep these looking the best, to enable to keep them looking variegated. Because if you've just spent a few quid on a variegated Syngonium, I don't suppose you really want a fully green one, because a fully green Syngonium is a lot cheaper. And yeah, you're not going to have the variegation, and so you'll just end up with Syngonium, which is a perfectly nice plant. They're relatively easy to look after. I think they have nice arrow-shaped green leaves, which is why they're called the arrowhead plant. But yes, obviously you're paying for the variegation, so you want to be able to keep on top of it. So pay attention, which is a good thing, because it's nice to pay attention to your plants, and it gives an extra, in my mind, it gives an extra interest in the plant, which is why I went for these. I've never grown them before, and it's always nice to try and do something different in the hobby and sort of learn a new thing. It sends you on a voyage of discovery, if you like, if that's not too much of a poetic way to put it. But I've enjoyed learning about these plants, learning how to look after them. And although I've been looking after plants since I was probably 10 years old or something like that, so far too many years to remember, there's always something to learn. There's so many different plants in the world and so many different types and different ways of looking after them. There's always something more to learn, and I love that. And it is always a fascinating hobby. So if you have a Syngonium Variegata, then let me know down in the comments, how are you getting on? Do you have any more other tips for me about looking after these plants? We've got the whole leca thing as well. Do you keep them in the potting compost, or do you keep them in leca, which is kind of a porous, I don't know whether it's man-made, I'm guessing it's a man-made clay-based medium to grow the plants in. From what I understand, it's an easier way to grow the plants. The roots can get down into it well and get all the nutrients out without having as many issues with pests and things like that. That is a whole area that I'm yet to discover. Obviously, I use bonsai soil in with my bonsai trees, which are a type of molar clay, sort of kiln hardened clay, which is porous, which is probably a similar type of thing to leca, but they're all very uniform balls, so I'm guessing they're probably produced in a man-made fashion. But that's a whole nother thing to discover, and I'll probably do a video on it because it's interesting. So that pretty much wraps it up for this video. I hope you found it useful. Please give it a thumbs up if you have. I always appreciate that. And subscribe if you're new around here. I really would love to see you here again. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you very soon on another houseplant video. Take care.